Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, a few weeks ago, early in the session, we had a debate about sports betting and if it was constitutional or whether it was unconstitutional, if it needed a constitutional amendment or if it didn't. So, colleagues, this morning I rise to challenge your thinking about whether SB 233 is constitutional or unconstitutional, because Section 2, Paragraph 7 of our Constitution says there's a separation of church and state. No money shall ever be taken from the public treasury directly or indirectly in aid of any church, sect, cult, or religious denomination, or of any sectarian institution. And then as I read SB 233, I looked on lines 313, and it said private school means a non-public school, sectarian or non-sectarian, which is accredited or in the process of becoming accredited by a recognized accrediting agency, as such term is defined in Code Section 20-14-96, or by one or more of the entities listed in subparagraph A of paragraph 6 of this code section. And so I had the question to wonder about sectarian schools and how money would be spent. So I decided just to do a quick Google search. And I happened to find the Archdiocese of Atlanta. And the mission statement for Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Atlanta states that our schools are committed to providing an excellent education in an environment of spiritual, moral, intellectual, and physical formation in accordance with the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Atlanta serve a vital role in the evangelizing and educational mission of the church. And so, colleagues, I thought in the state constitution it said, no money shall ever be taken from the public treasury, directly or indirectly, in aid of any church, sect, cult, or religious denomination, or of any sectarian institution. And so, colleagues, I looked at the remainder of this bill and I noticed that it's missing a constitutional amendment. Because if you truly want to give money in the form of educational choice, then you ought to do it with a constitutional amendment. This bill does not have a constitutional amendment. And then as I further read, colleagues, I read in this bill that if you were a corporation, had been around and could demonstrate financial soundness, you could get a school. How do we determine what qualifies as a school? If I got enough money and I can show that based off of anticipated enrollment, I got enough cash in the bank, then guess what? I too can get a school. Almost sounds like a show. You get a school, you get a school, you get a school. So where's the accountability for public dollars? This is done under the guise of educational freedom and educational choice, but colleagues, I tell you, the way I look at it, it appears to me to be a little unconstitutional. And when I think about what it means to talk about public education and what's happening in schools, I think history has shown us the condition of our schools are based on the environment in which we place them. When we decided to segregate neighborhoods and create districts that would be based off of neighborhood schools, that would mean that those schools would only allow the children from those neighborhoods to go to those schools. That means we segregated those schools. But now you say we've got some educational freedom and some educational choice. Well, this body has passed many bills and legislations about librarians being held accountable, about being able to teach critical race theory, about all of these other issues you don't want to see in public schools. But now, colleagues, where is that in this bill? But when I read this bill, on line 474, it says the Educational Savings Authority shall not require a participating school or service to provider to alter such school or provider's creed, practices, admission policies, employment policies, or curricula in order to receive account funds under the program. So, colleagues, everything that we've passed in this body doesn't apply to SB 233. So by proxy, you've created a separate system in which the rules that you want to govern public schools will not apply to those under this bill. And so everything that we've spent our time discussing about librarians and the certification and who is having what books in the library, you don't know what books will be in the library at any of these schools. So, colleagues, this is bad public policy because the rules that you've implemented for some don't apply to everybody. And this body has a job to have some good jurisprudence to make sure whatever we do, we apply it equally. But I'm going to tell you, colleagues, that the Promise Scholarship, whatever you want to call it, this ain't nothing but more game than Carter's got liver pills. Because if we were to be consistent in what we said and did, all the rules that we passed would have applied to these folks receiving these scholarships. But remember, I read to you, colleagues, it said on line 474, you can't change or alter a school or provider's creed, practices, admission policies, employment policies, or curriculum in order to receive funds. So, colleagues, I tell you that this bill should have had a constitutional amendment because it needs a constitutional amendment. Because I'm telling you, the same way when I had the conversation about sports betting, I felt it didn't need a constitutional amendment. You said it did. Well, I'm telling you today that this bill will need a constitutional amendment because I just told you what the state constitution says on section 2, paragraph 7. No money shall ever be taken from the public treasury directly or indirectly in aid of any church, sect, cult, or religious denomination or any sectarian institution. Unless I'm confused, colleague, this bill will not stop money from going to any of those schools. And so I want you to know if you vote for this bill today, you're voting for something that's unconstitutional. And so if you're going to vote for something unconstitutional, at least have the backbone to tell folks that what you just passed today is going to be held up in court. And the folks that you wanted to get educational choice and freedom to would never see it because it's going to be what? Unconstitutional. And you need to come back to the drawing board and try again. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield the well.